You're telling me that humans willingly subject themselves to burning hot water for relaxation? Zigzag's translucent antennae twitched in disbelief as he stared at his human classmate Jared. Jared, a stocky young man with a mop of unruly brown hair, leaned back in his chair, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Oh, my dear Zigzag, that's just the tip of the iceberg. You haven't seen anything yet. The alien cafeteria of Galactic University buzzed with the chatter of various species, each table a colorful mosaic of interstellar diversity. Jared's table, however, stood out like a sore thumb or whatever the equivalent was for the dozen different appendages represented there. Gloop, a gelatinous mass of purple goo with googly eyes, burbled curiously. What could possibly be more perplexing than voluntarily scolding oneself? Jared's grin widened. If that was even possible. Well, my jiggly friend, let me introduce you to the wonderful world of human self-care routines. A collective groan rose from the alien students. They had learned early on that any sentence from Jared that started with "let me introduce you" inevitably led to confusion, horror, or both. Oh, spare us the gory details, chirped K-like, a bird-like creature with iridescent feathers. Last time you introduced us to something, I couldn't look at a banana the same way for weeks. Come on, guys, Jared protested, throwing his hands up dramatically. It's not my fault your species haven't discovered the joys of potassium-rich fruits. Besides, this is different. This is about how we humans take care of ourselves. Zigzag's antennae drooped skeptically. If it involves more burning, I'm not sure I want to know. Well, Jared drawled, his eyes twinkling with mischief. By the great nebula, Gloop gurgled. There is more burning, isn't there? Jared leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Ever heard of waxing? The blank stares he received in response were answer enough. It's a hair removal technique, Jared explained, barely containing his glee. We spread hot wax on our skin, let it cool, then rip it off along with the hair. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background chatter of the cafeteria seemed to dim in the wake of this revelation. Kaylick was the first to break the silence, her beak clicking rapidly in what Jared had come to recognize as laughter. Oh, good one, Jared. You almost had us there for a second. But Jared's face remained serious, and slowly, the alien students realized he wasn't joking. You actually do that, Zigzag whispered, his compound eyes wide with horror. Jared nodded solemnly. Yep, some people even make a whole spa day out of it. It's a spa. Gloop asked hesitantly, clearly afraid of the answer. Oh yeah, Jared said, warming to his subject. It's a day dedicated to relaxation and self-care. You know, massages, facials, mud baths. Mud baths, K-like interrupted, her feathers ruffling in confusion. You bathe in dirt. Jared couldn't help but laugh at their expressions. Not exactly. It's special mud, supposed to be good for your skin or something. You slather it all over yourself and just soak in it. The aliens exchanged concerned glances. Gloop's surface rippled in what Jared had learned was their version of a shudder. But wait, Zigzag interjected. I thought humans were obsessed with cleanliness. You're always going on about germs and bacteria. How does covering yourself in mud fit into that? Jared shrugged. Beats me. I guess we're just full of contradictions. You can say that again, Kalak muttered. Oh, but we're just getting started, Jared said, his eyes gleaming. Ever heard of exfoliation? The blank stares returned. It's when we use rough materials to scrub off the top layer of our skin, Jared explained cheerfully. Gloop's eyes bulged slightly. You remove your own skin. Voluntarily, just the dead cells on top, Jared clarified, as if that made it any better. I think I'm going to be sick, Zigzag mumbled, his grey skin taking on a distinctly greenish tinge. Oh, come on, Jared scoffed. It's not that bad. It leaves your skin feeling all soft and smooth. I'll take your word for it, Kalak said dryly. Any other horrifying human habits you'd like to share? Jared's face lit up. Well, now that you mention it. The collective groan from his alien friends was almost enough to drown out the lunch bell. Saved by the bell, Gloop burbled, relief evident in their gelatinous form. Don't think you're getting off that easy, Jared warned as they all stood to leave. I haven't even told you about face masks yet. The look of terror that passed between his friends was almost enough to make Jared feel bad. Almost. As they filed out of the cafeteria, Jared couldn't help but wonder what his friends would think if they knew about some of the more extreme human beauty treatments. He made a mental note to introduce them to the concept of plastic surgery sometime. That ought to be good for a laugh. Little did Jared know, his innocent, mostly innocent revelation about human self-care routines was about to spark a chain of events that would turn the entire university upside down. Professor Xylop was having a perfectly normal day. Well, as normal as a day could be when you're teaching interspecies communication to a class full of beings from across the galaxy. He had just finished a fascinating lecture on the nuances of Arcturian gesticulation when he noticed something odd. The human student, Jared, was surrounded by a group of alien classmates, all of whom seemed to be in various states of distress. Xylop's curiosity got the better of him. "Is everything all right over here?" he asked, his tentacles rippling with concern. Jared looked up, a barely suppressed grin on his face. "Oh, everything's fine, Professor. I was just telling my friends here about some human self-care practices." Xylop's eye stalk swiveled towards the other students. Zixaye looked like he was about to faint. K-Like's feathers were so puffed up she resembled a disco ball, and Gloop. Well, Gloop was a shade of green Xylop had never seen before. "I see," Xylop said slowly, though he didn't see at all, "and these practices are distressing. Only if you're not used to them," Jared said cheerfully. "I was just explaining the concept of a hot stone massage to them." Xylop's tentacles curled in confusion. "Hot stone massage?" "Yeah, you know, where they heat up rocks and put them on your back," Jared explained, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Xylop blinked his 4 eyes in rapid succession. "And this is pleasurable for humans?" "Oh yeah, super relaxing," Jared nodded enthusiastically. Xylop turned to the other students. "Is this true?" Zixaye nodded weakly. "He's been telling us about all sorts of horrifying things humans do in the name of self-care. Professor, did you know they voluntarily remove their own skin? It's called exfoliation," Jared protested. "And it's just dead skin cells." Xylop felt a headache coming on, which was impressive considering his species didn't even have a centralized nervous system. "I think," he said slowly, "that this might warrant further discussion. Jared, would you be willing to give a presentation on human self-care practices to the class?" Jared's eyes lit up like a supernova. "Would I?" "Professor, I thought you'd never ask." As Jared bounced away, already planning his presentation, Xylop couldn't shake the feeling that he might have just made a terrible mistake. The next day, the interspecies communication classroom was buzzing with anticipation. Word had spread about Jared's upcoming presentation, and students from other classes had even snuck in to witness what promised to be an enlightening experience. Jared stood at the front of the room, practically vibrating with excitement. Behind him, a holoprojector flickered to life, displaying the title of his presentation, Human Self-Care, A Journey into Relaxation and Pain. Ahem, Jared cleared his throat dramatically. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of indeterminate gender, today we embark on a thrilling exploration of the human approach to self-care." A tentative tendril rose from the back of the room. It belonged to Squish, a cephalopod-like creature known for their inquisitive nature. "Excuse me, but isn't relaxation and pain contradictory?" Jared's grin widened. "Excellent question, Squish. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But for humans, the two often go hand in hand. Or tentacle in tentacle, in your case." A collective murmur of confusion rippled through the classroom. "Let's start with something simple," Jared said, clicking to the next slide. It showed a human submerged in a bathtub filled with what appeared to be bubbles. "You bathe in tiny atmospheric spheres," K-Lek chirped incredulously. "Not exactly," Jared chuckled. "These are soap bubbles. We add scented chemicals to our bath water to create these foamy bubbles. It's supposed to be relaxing." "But wouldn't that interfere with your respiratory functions?" Zixay asked, antennae twitching nervously. "Only if you inhale them," Jared shrugged. "Which, admittedly, does happen sometimes, but that's part of the fun." The alien students exchanged worried glances. Fun? Respiratory interference was fun? "Moving on," Jared said cheerfully, clicking to the next slide. It showed a human face covered in a green, goopy substance. Face masks. Gloop perked up. "Oh, like a protective covering for your sensory organs." "Close, but not quite," Jared grinned. We spread this stuff all over our faces and let it dry. It's supposed to clean out our pores and make our skin look better. But it looks like you're suffocating, ZXA protested. Nah, we can still breathe through our noses and mouths, Jared assured him. Though it does make talking a bit difficult, and laughing is right out, unless you want to crack the mask and look like you're molting. The class fell silent, trying to process this information. Oh, and sometimes these masks peel off, Jared added enthusiastically. You just grab an edge and rip the whole thing off your face. A thud echoed through the room as ZXA fainted dead away. Oops, Jared muttered. Maybe I should have saved that bit for later. Professor Zylop, who had been watching the presentation with a mixture of fascination and horror, quickly intervened. Perhaps we should take a short break to revive ZXA. As ZXA's friends rushed to his aid, Jared couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Maybe he had gone a bit overboard. But then again, they hadn't even gotten to the really good stuff yet. After a brief intermission and some smelling salts for ZXA, the presentation resumed. Jared, slightly chastened but still enthusiastic, decided to take a gentler approach. Okay, let's talk about something a bit less intense, he said, clicking to a new slide. It showed a human getting a massage. This is a massage. It's when someone uses their hands to apply pressure to your muscles. It's very relaxing and helps relieve tension. The alien students nodded cautiously. This seemed reasonable enough. Of course, Jared continued, unable to help himself. Sometimes they use hot stones, or stab you with needles, or walk on your back. What the collective shriek from the class was deafening. Jared backpedaled quickly. But that's advanced stuff. Let's stick to the basics for now. He clicked to the next slide, which showed a human in a sauna. This is a sauna. It's a small room that we heat up to really high temperatures. We sit in there and sweat out all our toxins. Gloop's surface rippled in confusion. But don't you have organs for that? Kidneys and livers and such? Well, yeah, Jared admitted. But sometimes it's nice to give them a hand, you know. The blank stares suggested that no, they did not know. Moving on, Jared said quickly. Let's talk about yoga. The next slide showed a human contorted into an impossible position. Yoga is a form of exercise that involves twisting your body into various shapes, Jared explained. It's supposed to be very relaxing and good for your flexibility. K-Like's beak clacked in disbelief. That doesn't look relaxing at all. It looks painful. Well, yeah, it can be a bit uncomfortable at first, Jared conceded. But you get used to it. No pain, no gain, right? The confused silence that followed suggested that this was not, in fact, right. Okay, maybe we should move on to something else, Jared said, sensing the growing unease in the room. How about we talk about meditation? A collective sigh of relief swept through the classroom. Surely this, at least, wouldn't involve any pain or bodily contortions. Meditation is a practice where we sit still and try to clear our minds, Jared explained. It's very peaceful and relaxing. The alien students nodded approvingly. This sounded much more reasonable. Of course, Jared added, some people prefer more active forms of meditation, like fire walking. The image on the screen changed to show humans walking barefoot across hot coals. The classroom erupted into chaos. You walk on fire, ZXA screeched, looking ready to faint again. It's not as bad as it looks, Jared protested over the din. The coals aren't actually that hot, and if you walk quickly enough, you don't get burned. That's not the point, K-Like squawked, her feathers puffed up to twice her normal size. Why would you do this at all? Jared shrugged. It's supposed to be empowering. You know, conquering your fears and all that. By setting yourself on fire, Gloop burbled incredulously. We don't set ourselves on fire, Jared clarified. We just walk on it a little bit. The look of utter bewilderment on his classmates' faces was priceless. Jared had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. Perhaps Professor Zylop interjected, his tentacles writhing in what Jared had come to recognize as extreme stress. We should end the presentation here. I think we've all learned quite enough about human self-care practices for one day. Jared's face fell. But we haven't even gotten to the really good stuff yet. I haven't told them about cryotherapy or sensory deprivation tanks, or that thing where tiny fish eat the dead skin off your feet. The horrified gasps that echoed through the classroom suggested that perhaps Jared had said too much. Professor Zylop's eye stalk swiveled wildly, taking in the scene of utter chaos his classroom had become. Zixie was curled into a tight ball, rocking back and forth and muttering something about the horror, the horror. Kay-like's feathers were so puffed up she resembled nothing so much as a disco ball having an existential crisis. And Gloop, well, Gloop had separated into several smaller blobs, each a different shade of distress. "That's quite enough," Jared Professor Xylop said firmly, all four of his eyes fixed sternly on the human student. "I think we've all had our fill of human self-care practices for today." Jared opened his mouth to protest, but the look on Xylop's face, or what passed for a face on a being with tentacles for a head, made him think better of it. "Yes, Professor," he mumbled, shuffling back to his seat. As Jared sat down, he couldn't help but feel a little guilty. He hadn't meant to traumatize his classmates. He'd just gotten carried away with the excitement of sharing his culture. Maybe he should have eased them into it a bit more gently. The rest of the class passed in a blur of awkward silence and occasional whimpers from the more sensitive students. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the period, there was a mad rush for the door as the alien students scrambled to escape. Jared hung back, feeling more than a little sheepish. As the last of his classmates fled, he approached Professor Xylop's desk. Professor," he said hesitantly. "I'm sorry if I went a bit overboard with my presentation. I didn't mean to upset anyone." Xylop's tentacles waved dismissively. "No permanent harm done, I suppose. Though I suspect the counseling department will be rather busy for the next few days." Jared winced. "Is there anything I can do to make it up to them?" Silent was silent for a moment, his eye-stalk swiveling thoughtfully. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his beak-like mouth. "Actually, Jared, I think there might be." The next day, Jared found himself standing in front of the class again, but this time, he felt considerably less excited about it. "All right, everyone," he began, his voice lacking its usual enthusiasm. "I know yesterday's presentation was a bit intense for some of you. So today, I thought I'd introduce you to some of the gentler aspects of human self-care." The class regarded him warily, many students poised to flee at the first sign of anything involving fire, sharp objects, or extreme temperatures. "Don't worry," Jared assured them. "No pain involved this time. Promise." He clicked to the first slide, which showed a human sitting cross-legged with their eyes closed. "This is basic meditation. No fire walking, no hot coals. Just sitting quietly and focusing on your breath." The tension in the room eased slightly. "And this," Jared continued, moving to the next slide, "is aromatherapy. We use pleasant scents to promote relaxation and well-being." Zixie's antennae perked up slightly. "That doesn't sound too bad," he admitted cautiously. Encouraged, Jared pressed on. "And here's one I think you might actually enjoy, Gloop. It's called a sound bath. You lie down and listen to soothing sounds and vibrations. It's incredibly relaxing." Gloop's scattered blobs began to slowly coalesce, a sign of growing interest. "For those of you who prefer something more active," Jared said, glancing at Kay-like, "there's Tai Chi. It's a series of slow, graceful movements that promote balance and inner peace." Kay-like's feathers smoothed slightly as she watched the video demonstration. As Jared continued through his presentation, introducing concepts like mindfulness, gentle stretching, and even adult coloring books, he could see his classmates gradually relaxing. By the time he reached his final slide, a serene image of a human taking a leisurely walk in nature, the atmosphere in the classroom had completely transformed. "So you see," Jared concluded, "human self-care isn't all about pushing our limits or enduring discomfort. Sometimes it's just about taking a moment to be kind to ourselves." As he finished speaking, Jared was surprised to hear a smattering of applause. He looked up to see his classmates regarding him with newfound appreciation and maybe even a little admiration. Zixie was the first to speak up. "I must admit, Jared, this is much more appealing than yesterday's offerings. Perhaps humans aren't completely insane after all." "Speak for yourself," Kay-like chirped, but there was a playful glint in her eye. "I'm still not convinced about those mud baths you mentioned yesterday." Gloop, now fully reintegrated, burbled contentedly. "The sound bath concept is intriguing. Do you think it would work for a being composed entirely of semi-solid goo?" Jared grinned. "Only one way to find out." As the class dissolved into excited chatter, discussing which human self-care practices they might like to try, Professor Xylop approached Jared. "Well done," he said, his tentacles rippling with approval. "I think you've managed to turn things around quite nicely." Jared beamed. "Thanks, Professor. I just needed to remember that sometimes less is more." Psylop nodded sagely. "An important lesson, and not just for humans. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I might go try some of that mindfulness you mentioned. It sounds quite soothing." As Xylop glided away, Jared couldn't help but chuckle. Who would have thought that his disastrous presentation would end up bringing the class closer together? He was pulled from his thoughts by a tap on his shoulder. It was ZXA, looking uncharacteristically shy. "Jared," the alien said hesitantly, "I was wondering, could you perhaps show me how to do that meditation thing? It looked quite nice." Jared's face split into a wide grin. "ZXA, my friend, I thought you'd never ask." Over the next few weeks, a strange phenomenon swept through Galactic University. Students of all species could be seen trying out various human relaxation techniques. The campus green was dotted with aliens attempting yoga poses with varying degrees of success, depending on their physiology. The library had to institute a waiting list for its new collection of adult coloring books. Even the cafeteria got in on the trend, offering a human-style spa cuisine menu, though the less said about their attempt at cucumber water, the better. Jared found himself in the unexpected position of campus celebrity. Students he'd never met before would approach him for advice on meditation techniques or aromatherapy blends. He even started a weekly gentle self-care class, which quickly became the most popular extracurricular activity on campus. But it wasn't until the day of the Intergalactic Cultural Festival that Jared truly realized the impact he'd had. The festival was in full swing, with booths representing cultures from across the galaxy. There were Zentarian fire dancers, Blobbian shape-shifting contests, and even a Quixilian quantum poetry slam. But the longest line by far was for the Earth booth. Furious, Jared made his way over, squeezing through the crowd until he could see what all the fuss was about. His jaw dropped. There, in the middle of the booth, was a full-blown human-style spa setup. ZXA was giving out aromatherapy massages, his delicate antennae proving surprisingly adept at working out muscle knots. Kalik was leading a Tai Chi class, her graceful movements drawing admiring coos from the onlookers in Gloop. Gloop had somehow rigged up a sound bath station, using their gelatinous body to conduct and amplify the soothing vibrations. As Jared stood there, slack-jawed with amazement, Professor Psylop sidled up next to him. "Quite a turnaround, wouldn't you say?" the professor said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Jared nodded, still too stunned to speak. "You know," Psylop continued, "when I first suggested you give that presentation, I had no idea it would lead to all this." He gestured at the bustling Earth booth. "I think you've taught us all a valuable lesson, Jared." Jared finally found his voice. "What's that, Professor?" Psylop's eye stalks swiveled to fix Jared with a penetrating gaze. "That sometimes the most alien concepts can become the most unifying. You've shown us that despite our differences, we all share a need for care and comfort." Jared felt a lump forming in his throat. I just wanted to share a bit of my culture," he mumbled. "And in doing so, you've created something beautiful," Xylop said. "A reminder that in this vast, often terrifying universe, we're all just trying to find a little peace." As if to punctuate Xylop's words, a cheer went up from the Earth booth. Jared looked over to see Gloop demonstrating the downward dog yoga pose, their gelatinous body forming a perfect inverted V. Jared couldn't help but laugh. "You know, Professor," he said, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye, "I think you're right. We're not so different after all." Xylop's tentacles rippled in what Jared had come to recognize as a smile. "Indeed we're not, Jared. Indeed we're not." As they stood there, watching aliens from across the galaxy come together over mud masks and meditation, Jared felt a warmth spreading through his chest. He'd come to Galactic University, hoping to learn about other cultures, but in the end he'd taught them something too. And really, isn't that what education is all about? Later that night, as the festival wound down and the last of the face masks were peeled off much to the horror of a few unprepared onlookers, Jared found himself surrounded by his friends. "You know," ZXA said, his antennae drooping with exhaustion, but his eyes shining with contentment, "I never thought I'd say this, but you humans might be onto something with this whole self-care business." Kay-like nodded, her feathers gleaming with a post-yoga glow. "I must admit, that Tai Chi is quite invigorating." Though I still think your hot yoga sounds like a form of torture. Hey, don't knock it till you've tried it, Jared laughed. Gloop, who had been quietly pulsating in a corner, suddenly spoke up. I have a confession to make, they burbled. I may have accidentally discovered a new form of meditation. The others turned to look at Gloop curiously. You see, Gloop continued, during the sound bath demonstrations, I found that if I vibrated at just the right frequency, I could enter a state of, well, I can only describe it as gooey nirvana. There was a moment of stunned silence, then everyone burst out laughing. Only you, Gloopjad chuckled, wiping tears from his eyes. Only you could turn a human relaxation technique into a species-specific transcendental experience. As their laughter echoed through the now empty festival grounds, Jared looked around at his friends, a neurotic insectoid, a high-strung avian, a blob of sentient goo, and himself, the crazy Deathworlder who'd introduced them all to the joys and occasional terrors of human self-care. It was, he realized, a perfect microcosm of the university itself, a place where the most unlikely combinations could come together to create something truly special. You know what he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. I think this calls for a celebration. His friends looked at him warily. Oh, relax, Jared grinned. I was just thinking we could all go for a nice, soothing mud bath. The chorus of groans and protests that followed was music to his ears. Some things, it seemed, would always remain quintessentially human. And Jared wouldn't have it any other way.